The colony breathed like a living thing. Kale pressed his back against the bioluminescent wall, watching the pulsing blue veins of light ripple through the alien architecture like a heartbeat made visible. 5 years. 5 years he had waited, trained, bled, and burned for this moment. And now he was finally inside Velthera, the sovereign colony of Queen Seraphine, the most feared ruler in the outer constellation. He checked his cloaking device and moved deeper into the corridor. People back on Earth called him a ghost operative. His superiors called him their finest weapon. But tonight, Kale Drennan was neither soldier nor ghost. Tonight, he was a man with a wound that had never healed, a scar carved not by blade, but by humiliation. He remembered it clearly. 5 years ago, he had been sent as Earth's diplomatic envoy to negotiate a peace treaty with the Velthera colony. Young, idealistic, full of hope. He had trusted Queen Seraphine. He had more than trusted her. There had been nights aboard her ship where words became something else entirely, warm and breathless and full of impossible promise. He had been foolish enough to believe it was real. Then she had exposed him before her entire council. Displayed his private communications to Earth. Branded him a spy. Had him dragged out in restraints while her court watched with cold amusement. She had laughed, that low, musical sound he had once found intoxicating, and dismissed him like an insect. The treaty collapsed. 3 border settlements burned in the war that followed. 47 people died. Kale blamed himself. And then he blamed her. He slipped past 2 sentinels, their carapace armor glinting in the low light. The Veltheri were tall, nearly 7 feet, with silver-blue skin that shimmered faintly like moonlight on still water. Their features were angular and severe, their eyes entirely white, capable of seeing in complete darkness. Physically, they were formidable. Emotionally, they were considered by most humans to be entirely cold-blooded. Kale knew better. That was the problem. He reached the intelligence core, the nerve center of the colony's defense grid. His mission was surgical: extract classified military coordinates, plant a data virus that would cripple the colony's communication network for months, and leave without a trace. Earth's Shadow Council wanted Seraphine weakened. Isolated. But Kale wanted more than that. He wanted to look her in the eyes and make her feel small. The way she had made him feel. His fingers worked quickly across the alien terminal when a sound froze him solid. Breathing. Close. Controlled. I wondered how long before you came. Her voice. Still musical. Still devastating. He turned slowly. Queen Seraphine stood in the doorway, robed in deep violet, her silver hair unbound and cascading past her shoulders. She looked exactly as he remembered, except for one thing. Her hands rested protectively over the unmistakable curve of her abdomen. She was pregnant. And the way she looked at him, not with cold triumph, but with something terrifyingly close to relief, made his entire plan begin to crack. "You're not going to run," Kale said, his voice rougher than he intended. Seraphine stepped into the room and the door sealed behind her. She moved carefully, deliberately, in a way that was utterly unlike the commanding, fluid grace he remembered. Everything about her movement now was protective of that rounded center of gravity. "Run from you." A faint curve of her lips. "Kale. I have been waiting for you. Planning my execution. Planning this conversation." She lowered herself onto a curved bench beside the terminal, folding her hands in her lap. "You've been inside my colony for 11 minutes. You bypassed 4 security layers I specifically left open for you." The admission hit him like cold water. "You led me here." "Yes." He crossed the space between them in 3 strides, planting both hands on the wall beside her head, forcing her to look up at him. Even now, especially now, she was infuriatingly composed. "Why?" Her white eyes held his. "Because the child I carry is dying. And you are the only person in 2 star systems who can save it." Silence dropped over the room like a stone into still water. Kale pushed back. Ran a hand through his hair. "That's impossible. I'm human. You're..." During your time aboard my diplomatic vessel, she said quietly, there was an incident in the medical bay. You were sedated after the summit banquet, a reaction to the atmospheric compounds. Our healers administered a stabilizing treatment. She paused. The treatment used a biological anchor. Yours. It was unprecedented. The compound bonded with your cellular structure and created what we call a Valkyrie, a life thread. A genetic bridge. Kale stared at her. You're telling me that child is connected to me biologically. Not in the way your species would define it. You are not the father in any traditional sense. She finally looked away, the first crack in her composure. But your life thread is woven into its existence. Without a renewed connection to your living biology, the child's immune system will collapse within 30 days. And the child's father? A long pause. He died in the border war. The one that followed your removal. The words landed somewhere complicated in Kale's chest. He turned away, staring at the pulsing walls. The humiliation, he said finally. In front of your council. Why? Because, she said softly, my council had discovered what had grown between us during those weeks. They believed you had compromised me. That I was becoming too sympathetic to human interests. Her voice dropped. If I had not made the demonstration, they would have had you quietly killed and blamed Earth for the provocation. A full war would have followed. Millions dead. He turned back to look at her. For the first time, her expression was completely unguarded. Raw. And he saw it, the thing she had buried under 5 years of sovereign performance. Regret. Genuine and enormous. You sacrificed me, he said. I chose the lives of millions over one. Her chin lifted slightly. I would make the same choice again. But I have never stopped, she stopped herself. Smoothed her robe. I need your help, Kale. The fate of my entire species depends on this child surviving. She carries a biological compound in her blood that can cure the genetic degradation slowly killing every Velthari born in the last decade. She is not just my daughter. She is our future. He was quiet for a long time. Then, low and dangerous, you have a remarkable talent for needing things from me at the worst possible moments. Despite everything, the corner of her mouth moved. Yes. I do. They gave him quarters 3 levels below the royal chambers. He didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of the bioluminescent sleeping platform and stared at the ceiling and tried to organize his thoughts into something resembling a plan. He had come here for revenge. He had come here with a data virus loaded in his wrist device and enough righteous anger to fuel a small war. Now he was apparently a biological anchor for an alien heir whose survival might save an entire species. The universe, he decided, had a vicious sense of humor. At dawn, or what passed for dawn, when the colony's light shifted from deep blue to warm amber, Seraphine's attendant brought him to the medical wing. The healer, a slender elder named Orvith, explained the procedure in careful, precise language. Kale would need to undergo a resonance session every 3 days. Physical proximity to Seraphine during the session would strengthen the bond transfer. Skin contact accelerated the process considerably. Define skin contact, Kale said flatly. Orvith blinked his white eyes. The life thread responds most efficiently to sustained contact. A held hand. A resting forearm. I understand, Kale said. The first session was clinical and uncomfortable, not physically, but in every other way. Seraphine sat across from him in a low chair, her silver hair pulled back, dressed simply without her robes of state. She looked younger. More exposed. Orvith placed Kale's palm against the inside of her wrist where her pulse beat with slow, alien rhythm, and connected a gossamer network of filaments to both of them. The resonance moved through him like warm current. He felt something, distant, fragile, but unmistakably alive, flutter at the edge of his awareness. The child. Small and urgent and fighting. He hadn't expected to feel anything. That had been a strategic error. When the session ended, neither of them spoke immediately. She's strong, Kale said finally. Seraphine's breath caught almost imperceptibly. You felt her? Barely. Like a candle behind a closed door. She looked at him with an expression he couldn't name. No one outside Veltheri bloodline has ever felt a resonance. Our healers thought it impossible for a human. She paused. You are unusual, Kale Drennan. I've been told. The days that followed built an architecture of complicated closeness that Kale hadn't anticipated and couldn't dismantle. He learned the colony's rhythms, the morning assemblies, the evening communal meals where Veltheri sat in concentric circles and exchanged what they called memory gifts, brief telepathic impressions of significant moments shared freely between community members. He was excluded from these, naturally, but Seraphine began describing hers to him afterward in quiet words over tea that tasted like copper and jasmine. He learned that she hadn't laughed genuinely since the day she sent him away. He learned that she governed with a precision that bordered on poetry, every decision balanced against 20 variables, every life weighed with a seriousness that exhausted her visibly by evening. He learned that she slept poorly. That she sat by the observation window in the late hours watching the stars with her hands pressed to her abdomen, speaking softly to the child inside her in old Veltheri dialect. He found her there one night, unable to sleep himself. He sat beside her without invitation. She didn't send him away. What do you tell her? He asked. Seraphine was quiet a moment. That she is loved. That the universe is strange and difficult and worth experiencing. A pause. That someone unexpected is helping keep her alive. The silence between them shifted quality. Became something warmer and more dangerous. You should know, Kale said quietly, I still haven't decided what I'm going to do. I know. She turned to look at him. In the starlight filtering through the observation glass, her silver-blue skin held the faintest luminescence. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Kale. I'm only asking you to stay long enough for her to be safe. He looked at her for a long moment. At the vulnerability she wore now without armor. At the careful, exhausted dignity of a woman carrying impossible weight. Go to sleep, Seraphine, he said gruffly. But he stayed by the window until she did. On the 19th day, everything fractured. Kale was in the intelligence core, Arnie fully intact, reviewing colony defense vulnerabilities out of pure operational habit when the alarms began. Not the slow pulse of a drill. The hard, shrieking cry of genuine emergency. He moved without thinking. 3 corridors. 2 levels. He was through the doors of the medical wing before the second wave of alarms faded, and what he found made his blood go cold. Seraphine was on the treatment platform, her face pale as bleached bone, Orvith and 2 other healers working over her with urgent efficiency. Her white eyes were half closed, her breathing shallow and rapid. What happened? Kale demanded. The resonance bond is destabilizing. Orvith didn't look up. Something triggered an immune cascade. The child is pulling energy faster than the transfer can sustain. What do you need? Direct contact. Sustained. The filament transfer is no longer sufficient, we need full somatic bonding. Kale was already moving to the platform. He took her hand. Her fingers were cold, trembling faintly. Her eyes found his, and there was fear in them. Real, naked fear. He had never seen Seraphine afraid of anything. I have you, he said, and wasn't sure why, but meant it completely. Direct somatic bonding, Orvith said carefully, requires proximity. Sustained. The life thread responds to. Tell me what to do. What followed was not what he had imagined. It was Orvith guiding him to hold her, truly hold her, her back against his chest, her cold hands wrapped in both of his chin at her temple, while the resonance moved through both of them like a tide coming in. He felt the child again, closer now. Stronger. Desperate and small and fighting with everything she had. And he felt Seraphine, the real Seraphine, beneath the sovereignty and the sacrifice and the 5 years of careful armor. Brilliant. Lonely. Carrying grief like a stone she'd forgotten was there because she'd carried it so long. He held tighter. Let the current move through him without resistance. An hour passed. Maybe more. When it was over, Seraphine's color had returned. Her breathing steadied. She didn't move out of his arms immediately, and he didn't release her. They stayed still while Orvith quietly ushered the other healers out of the room. Kale. Her voice was very quiet. Still here. She turned in his arms just enough to look at him. Close. Closer than anything planned or clinical. The air between them carried the memory of warmth and the sharp awareness of everything unsaid across 5 years. I am sorry, she said. And it was not a queen's apology, carefully worded for political consumption. It was a woman's. Simple and devastating. I have been sorry every day. He looked at her for a long time. At the exhaustion around her eyes. At the silver hair coming loose from its binding. At the curve of the life they had accidentally, improbably, become responsible for together. I know, he said finally. And he kissed her. It was not gentle and it was not brief. It was 5 years of accumulated fury and grief and something that had never entirely died, meeting in the amber light of a medical wing in an alien colony while stars wheeled past the observation glass outside. She kissed him back with the same intensity, her cold hands finding his face, and for a long, suspended moment, 2 worlds collapsed into a single point of warmth. When they finally parted, both breathing unevenly, she pressed her forehead against his jaw. This complicates things, she murmured. Everything about you complicates things, he said into her hair. The Shadow Council's extraction team arrived on day 26. Kale spotted them on the perimeter sensors, 4 operatives in stealth configuration, carrying orders he recognized because he had carried similar ones before. They weren't here for coordinates or data. They were here to finish what his mission had started. To cripple the colony permanently. And to extract him whether he cooperated or not. He had 4 minutes before they breached the outer perimeter. He went to Seraphine. She was in her council chamber when he entered, mid-briefing with her senior advisors. She read his face in an instant and dismissed them with a single gesture. Tell me. He told her. Quickly, clearly, without softening it. The Shadow Council. The original mission. The data virus still loaded in his wrist device. All of it. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for 3 seconds exactly. How many? 4 outside. Likely orbital support. If I signal them to stand down, they'll flag me as compromised and escalate. And if you don't signal them? They breach in, he checked, 2 minutes 40 seconds. Seraphine stood. Crossed to him. She placed her palm flat against his chest, not dramatically, just steadily, the way she'd learned his heartbeat over 26 days of resonance sessions and starlit windows and 1 kiss that had rearranged the architecture of his anger entirely. You came here to destroy me, she said. Yes. And now? He looked at her. At the life moving beneath her robes. At the colony breathing around them, 40,000 Velthari lives depending on an heir whose survival was threaded through his own biology. At the woman who had broken him and then, somehow, been the only one to begin reassembling the pieces. I'm going to need your colony's defense grid in about 90 seconds, he said. She almost smiled. You have both. What followed was efficient and not entirely clean. Kale used his Earth clearance codes to feed false extraction confirmation to the orbital support while Seraphine Sentinels neutralized the ground team non-lethally. He transmitted a falsified mission report, colony destabilized, objective achieved, operative returning, and watched the Shadow Council's ship retreat from sensor range. He had just committed treason against Earth's shadow government. He was surprised to discover he felt entirely calm about it. The colony's senior council convened within the hour, and Kale stood before them without pretense, not as an infiltrator playing a role, but as himself, with the full weight of what he was and what he'd done laid plainly before them. He explained the Shadow Council's operations, the data they had compromised, the political forces moving against Velthara from within Earth's government. He offered everything he knew. Several council members called for his imprisonment. Seraphine overruled them with 3 quiet words in Old Velthari that Orvith later translated for him as, he is ours now. 2 days later, the child was born. She arrived in the early amber hours, attended by Orvith and 2 healers, while Cale waited outside the chamber in a state of complicated, helpless anxiety that he would never fully admit to. When Orvith finally opened the door, the old healer's expression was the closest thing to joy Cale had seen on a Velthari face. Seraphine was resting against the curved pillows when he entered. The child lay against her chest, small, silver blue, her tiny eyes closed, her breathing slow and even and strong. Her immune markers are perfect, Orvith said softly from the doorway. The compound in her blood is everything we hoped. She will save them, Cale Drennan. She will save all of them. He stood at the edge of the platform and looked at the 2 of them. He didn't have language for what moved through him in that moment. It wasn't a clean feeling. It was large and complicated, and it asked things of him he wasn't sure he knew how to give. Seraphine looked up. Tired and luminous. "Come here," she said. He sat beside her. She turned slightly so he could see the child's face, serene and impossibly small, her features a quiet fusion of her mother's angular grace and something softer that he couldn't explain but recognized. The child opened her eyes. White as her mother's. And then, briefly, inexplicably, the color shifted, to the dark brown of his own. "She sees you," Seraphine murmured. He reached out. The child's tiny hand found his finger and held with surprising certainty. "I came here to destroy you," he said quietly. Not accusation. Just truth between them. "I know." Seraphine leaned her head against his shoulder. "And instead you saved my entire species." A pause. "What will you do now, Cale Drennan? You cannot go back to Earth." He thought about the data virus still in his wrist device. He pressed 2 buttons and deleted it permanently. "I'm exactly where I need to be," he said. Outside the observation glass, 2 stars moved into alignment, one warm and gold, one cool and silver, crossing paths in the vast dark for the first time in recorded history. On 2 worlds, the morning was beginning. The end.